Lesson 7, Parliamentary Procedures, Votes, and Voting. So, putting the question. The question is asked by the chair or the presiding officer. This is the act of taking the vote on a question. A question may be voted immediately after it is stated by the chair or as soon as a debate or a discussion is closed. If the motion is undebatable, the chair takes a vote on it immediately. But if it's debatable, it is not put to a vote until sufficient time has been given for a debate or discussion. So, if no one rises to claim the floor, the chair proceeds to take the vote unless interrupted. The affirmative vote should be taken ahead of the negative. Even if the affirmative has already won, the negative should also be taken. So the chair should make sure that the members understand correctly what they are voting on. To avoid misunderstanding or consequent disruption, the chair should make sure that all members understand every question that they had to vote on. Methods of voting. There are 6 methods of voting: by voice, by show of hands, by rising, by roll call, general consent, and by ballot. Another different classification is absentee voting and cumulative voting. The first method is by voice. It is most expeditious, which means efficient. It is generally used. It is also practical for majority vote or in large assemblies. So, for example, the chair could call on the question by aye for in favor or no for against. Next is by showing of hands. This consists of raising hands and also for practical large assemblies. The chair would say, please raise your right hand for those who are in favor with the motion, and he would do the same for those who are against. Next is by rising, used for actual and more accurate count of vote, practical for crowded gatherings. So, by using this method, the secretary could count on those members who have risen, and then the chair would, example, say, those who are in favor with the motion, please rise. Those who are against, please rise. That were the examples of rising. Next method is by roll call. It is also known as voting by yeas and nays or ayes and noes. So this method is called by alphabetical order. The same is true in the cases of convention where the delegates are responsible for their corresponding organization. For example, the Congress or the Senate. Other members who wish not to vote should answer present or abstain. Next is by general consent. The questions are decided without the formality of actually taking the vote. But if objections arises within the two cases, namely readings of minutes or minor correction, then the general consent should be decided to be discarded and the question should be asked. By ballot, the principal purpose of this method is secrecy. It is commonly used in the elections of candidates of office and in deciding certain questions in which some members may not wish to reveal their sentiments. To conduct the balloting, which includes the distribution and collection of ballots, the chair usually appoints a committee of tellers composed of 3 members. So, the presiding officer of the votes, and then the secretary, and then the person who reads the votes or the counting of votes. So, and there can also be watchers appointed if the balloting is for elections of officers. The chair should make sure that everyone understands the procedure of voting. After the votes has been counted, the chairman renders the report to the assembly by reading the result without announcing the winning candidates by the chairman of the tellers. Then the presiding officer will announce and determine the winners. Is a different classification for voting, absentee voting and cumulative voting. So, what is absentee voting? Absentee voting, or the practice of allowing absent members to vote. It is generally true among organizations with scattered members. There are two ways of voting in absentia, by mail and by proxy. By mail is a printed form containing the proposition to be voted upon is sent to the absent member with instructions printed on the provided paper. It should be answered by yes or no's. It must be returned with sealed envelope to make sure that the vote is not tampered. Next is by proxy. As used is a document in the form of a special power of attorney authorizing a person to vote in place of another. The next is cumulative voting. Principally used to protect the majority groups, this method is used when there are two or more offices of the same categories to be filled. Cumulative voting, which means the voter is allowed as many votes as there are candidates in the election. Next is filling blanks. When several names or propositions are offered for consideration of the assembly, they are commonly used when making nomination of the office. So, filling blanks, they are not considered as amendments of another but as an independent proposition. So next is announcement of votes. The result of any voting is not considered official until it has been announced by the chair of the organization. Next is the presiding officer should take care to be as accurate as possible in estimating the vote if it is taken by voice, showing of hands, or rising. So, announcing of votes, the presiding officer should announce the result of the vote and mention whether the motion has been carried or lost and its corresponding effects. Division of assembly. Division of assembly means that any member doubts the accuracy of the chair is determining or estimating the vote may call for a division of assembly. So, what is division of assembly? Division of assembly should not be confused with a motion to reconsider. The division of assembly does not reopen the question to debate but simply oblige the chair to recount the vote. So, the call for deviation should be made immediately after the result of the vote have been announced. Next is reopening polls. A member who has failed to vote because of late arrival or some other valid reason may be allowed to vote through a motion to reopen the polls. But if the chair would not allow that, then the polls would not be reopened. Change of vote. A member may change his vote as his right up to the time the result is announced, provided that the voting is not by ballot. But after the result of the voting has been announced, no change of the vote is permitted, even if by unanimous consent, except where there is a clear proof of the error that logically warrants such change, as where a question has been mistreated by the chair. So, abstention. Abstention is the right to vote by every eligible member. It is also as equal when he wanted to abstain. So, a member can abstain if he is entirely ignorant with the question on hand. Abstention cannot be counted for or against a candidate or preposition. So, clearly, abstention is just a matter of a privilege by a member. So, thank you.